the so I'll use my limited voice to say this is the Just Transitions meeting of the Vermont Climate Council on February 13th, 2025. And I just dropped the agenda in the chat. And so maybe, Abby, would you be willing to walk through it? I don't know if you want to do a screen share or whatever, just to like go through our agenda. And then I think we might have minutes from previous things we need to approve. And if you could do that, Abby, that'd be a super help so I don't waste my voice.
Okay. Yeah. So let me do a screen share of our agenda, which is also in the chat. So what we planned, was everyone able to see my screen? Let me just double check. Okay. So what we plan to cover this evening is primarily kind of a catch up on the drafting of our Just Transition chapter for the revised climate action plan. Before we do that, we hope to have a little bit, this is the wrong document, sorry, this is the meeting minutes. Okay, sorry.
You go to the link that I put in the chat. I think that's the minute. That should be the agenda. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. So again, still the majority of the meeting will be focused on our chapter development, but we also hope to get a brief update from the Climate Action Office. So Sophie and Liz are with us for at least a little bit after we do this review of the agenda and then review and acceptance of our minutes from our January 16th meeting. We also wanted to just hold some space on the agenda in case, in the event that folks wanted to just talk about, kind of share feelings and reactions to what's sort of happening in the world right now. It's a pretty heavy and unprecedented time with a lot of executive orders and some pause and stays on federal funding, et cetera. And just wanted to both honor and acknowledge that kind of happening in the world and have kind of an apolitical conversation around kind of how it's feeling and how people are reacting or what the impacts might be to individuals or organizations. Then we wanted to move into, again, this chapter development section. Our intention was to go section by section of the chapter in two different ways. One, by actually holding some silent reading moments for people to be able to read on the screen in the moment, if you haven't had a chance to take a look and a read through the chapter draft as it exists. And then we actually wanted to read it, so kind of acknowledging kind of different learning styles and information absorption preferences. So read through each section and then take questions and edits and comments, recommendations for approval as we move towards a final draft that we'll be sharing with the Climate Council in March. We'll take public comment in the middle of that kind of chapter review just to kind of break things up a little bit. And then finish the agenda with kind of like what's next, mostly just looking at our calendar and thinking about upcoming meetings and doing a final review of the timeline for the chapter development. So any questions about the agenda, any additions that anyone wants to propose or changes? Okay. Great. So let's move into looking at the meeting minutes from our last meeting in January on the 16th. So these are also on the screen. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Were there any comments or corrections? We used this meeting in January to actually do a lot of acceptance of meeting minutes, given that we had a quorum in January, which we hadn't in previous months. So the September, October, November, and December meeting minutes were also reviewed and accepted with one edit at that January meeting. But anything else anyone noted from the January meeting minutes. A lot of edits here, recommendations for additions as part of the review of the first draft of the chapter sections that we discussed in January.
I was just gonna say, I know that I had to fall off that meeting unexpectedly pretty early on. I didn't know if we wanted to know that or not. I don't think we generally get that nitty gritty. I know some folks do, so I can't remember what we do, but don't know if it matters.
You mean as part of like the attendance or just notes when you left the meeting, Sam?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, I don't think we do this, but I know that some of our, so I sit in a lot of the towns. Some of them do, some of them don't. I can't remember what we do, so I just thought I would highlight it. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. We've not gone to that level of granularity in the past. I don't know if other
Great. That's the
subcommittees
bit.
do or if that's feeling like kind of an oversight on our part, but I've not seen us do that previously.
Perfect. Let's leave it. Thanks.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm on the same page about that. Like, if you were there, you were there. If it was for 1 minute, maybe we'd go nitty gritty, but you were there for a significant part.
Okay. Any comments on the minutes or we feeling comfortable without comment? We'll take that as an acceptance of the minutes. Okay, great. Thank you. So did Sophie jump off?
Yeah,
Yes.
jump.
Okay. All right. Liz, is there any kind of climate action office update that you want to offer?
I'll share just an updated kind of outline of assignments and due dates for the climate action plan. So I just sent a link for that, and that I think folks have seen it before, but it outlines the chapters, who's leading it, when it's due. So folks are moving along and drafting those chapters, and I'm meeting with draft leads, Sophie and I, just to check in on word count and things like that. But otherwise, I think that's where it's at, is just moving ahead and drafting those chapters.
Yeah, thank you for that, Liz. And I would just say, I guess since we're talking about timeline for the climate action plan revision, I would say the dates that I think are most cute in my mind is that we have our next Just Transition Subcommittee meeting on March 6th. At least that's when it's currently scheduled for. And our vision had been that we would have a final review of our Just Transition chapter for kind of, just subcommittee approval. And then we would be making that chapter accessible and available to the Vermont Climate Council's meeting on March 10th, which is just the following Monday, I believe. So I think that gives us a little sense of time frame, which is when we go through the draft chapter. Here we are on February 13th. We have, less than a month to have drafters and any comments incorporated into the draft chapter for a final review on March 6th.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep, getting that good to go for March 10th council meeting.
And Liz, does that align with so on the thing you just shared, it says that our draft chapter is due on March 1st. Is it okay if we do a final review on the 6th and then get it to the council, or do we need to really stick to the March 1st thing?
I feel like Sophie might have a better answer than me, but yeah, we're gonna be presenting it in some, like, we need to give the council some advance time to read it. I'm not sure exactly what
Right.
date between March 1 and March 10th we're gonna be sending that out. But I mean, it'd be great to have it, as soon as we can, but if it's
Yeah.
March 6th, I think that's okay. But just good to keep, yeah, Sophie up to date on that as well.
I do think this came up at a previous meeting, and Sophie had confirmed that it would be okay if we could like technically approve the chapter on the 6th, because we would be able to likely share a near final draft, even if it was a few days, and then the final could be updated. So I can confirm.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw that exchange over email. I'll try and pull it up, but I'm pretty sure we confirmed that is okay.
That sounds right. Yeah, share a draft, and then we could update the link with a revised version after that subcommittee meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
my
even
recollection
what
also,
we-
so I think that is though an important kind of milestone to enter into our timeline as the Just Transition Subcommittee, which would be that March 1st is a Saturday, and so it's really actually February 28th, which is the Friday, which would be when we would want to have a final draft that we would be willing to share with the Climate Council, knowing that it's not until the following Thursday that we would actually get subcommittee approval on the final version. So there could be a few edits as a result of that March 6th conversation, but that we're actually hoping to have drafters with a final version on the 28th. So that's just over 2 weeks away.
And that makes sense. And then, so the Climate Council will meet to review all of these on the 10th. And it's a mostly in-person meeting with hybrid options for anyone who can't be there in person on March 10th. So that's where we're gonna just dig into all of this. So our chapter, other subcommittees chapters and things like that are going to be under review. So we want to make sure everyone has time to read them and digest them and have thoughts before we actually meet. So that's why the timeline. And then getting things to a point where the Climate Council as a whole is able to say, yes, we like these, and then sending them out as saying these are the draft chapters and get public comment on them. So public comment and engagement is going to happen we always have public comment, but public engagement to really get people's thoughts and feedback during April and maybe part of May. And then we come back and we take that in and we revise based on that in May and June, I think, and get something officially approved by July 1st. Is that right? Am I got my timeline right?
Yep, that's right.
Thanks. So that's where we are. And then there's another section that we are partially responsible for, but this is not something that we need to do now, but it will be a report on public engagement practices and what's happened with public engagement. And that's not something that's necessarily the same level of going through and getting public feedback on, because it's a report. But that's the other chapter that our subcommittee is responsible for. And I think it's listed as Sophie and me being lead authors, but obviously all of us can be weighing in, and we'll want CBI weighing in, and that'll be for how has public engagement gone and reporting on that. So that's not imminent, but just another thing that's on that list that Liz shared on the climate action plan outline. So if you're like, hey, Just Transitions has to do this other thing, that's what that is. So
yeah, I think that could be a nice segue, Kelly, into just checking with subcommittee liaisons around either conversations that may be happening in other subcommittees, or even if you each, myself included, so I guess we reached out and kind of assembled a little bit of a feedback from those chairs about how the community engagement reports were used, or how public engagement was valuable in their revision process. That was a kind of a I won't say a charge, but like an ask from Sophie and Kelly at our last meeting.
Mhm.
So I thought I would ask Sam or Claire, Callie and Danielle are not here yet, but any updates that you want to share as liaisons? So
Um,
Claire from Science and Data.
yeah, I apologize. I was not at our last meeting and I missed that. So I did not reach out to Jared, who is the co-chair. Although Science and Data is not making recommendations first, well, they're not making substantive recommendations, so it's I think a little different. I will say that update, we have not met this year. We have our first meeting of the year this Friday, where we'll be talking about the current drafts of the three chapters our subcommittee is drafting, which are all sort of context setting chapters. One is about the scientific basis of climate change. I think that's the title, which I have seen a draft of, although I have not read in detail. And then there's two other chapters. One is the health chapter, which I had circulated an outline to this group so that there would be an opportunity to review. And then a third chapter, which the title I am blanking on, but I'm sure it's in the list that Liz circulated. So we'll be talking about those three chapters this Friday, and kind of getting a chance to review current status. So I think the health chapter in the outline, we talked about the connection between just transitions and that chapter. I know Sophie provided David Grass with some comments, some of which did highlight kind of where there was crossover. And then the other chapter where I had flagged at our last subcommittee, there may be areas to include some considerations of equity where I can't remember if it's the Vermont Energy or Climate Economy chapter, but I have not seen an updated draft of that. So we'll see this Friday, and can always report back at our next subcommittee meeting.
Friday is in like tomorrow, Claire?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Okay. It's like maybe it's next Friday, but no, this Friday. Okay, great.
Yeah, tomorrow is Friday. That's good. Clearly.
Will we have some time today to discuss that outline, or did you want feedback individually, Claire?
So I had requested feedback by, I think it was last Tuesday. So at this point, I think I haven't seen like a full draft, but the subcommittee was supposed to have pretty more fleshed out drafts by tomorrow. Only one of them had been circulated though, so I'm not sure where the others are. But I think if there's other opportunities to like weigh in before the chapters get finalized, I could certainly flag that.
Thank you, Claire. Sam, anything from cross-sector mitigation?
I guess yes and no. We're kind of done. I think we're at for the moment with our like marathon of meetings. I think. I think. I know we had some scrambles to get the recommendations in. So buildings and thermal and transportation, I think all the recommendations went through. I'm not sure where we landed with the electricity recommendations. And I'm not sure if anything else is gonna happen to those. I know Melissa and several others on the committee did note that we didn't do the complete like Excel sheet that we were supposed to do, especially in terms of we just weren't able. We spent so much time on the wordsmithing of all the pathway strategies and actions that there wasn't, I mean, there's a lot of conversation that might have gone into in a narrative form into some of the boxes, including equity, but that wasn't filled out as a full group. And I don't know if that will happen or if that was a point, but I think it was noted that I think that the group was noting that to raise awareness, to be like, we should probably revisit this. As the liaison, I think they did a decent job at talking through a lot of stuff that we might want them to or might think of, but that's just from my single perspective. And I did recommend, if there are things either like if if you want to send the recommendations for us to review, like you could do that. I don't know if we're automatically going to do that. So things like that, and if that would be helpful. But I don't know where things lie. I think we had so many meetings that I don't really know. It seems like everyone's probably going to take a break. So I don't really know what the status of our group will be between now and I think the drafting for some of those chapters is not due until like June or something. So I'm not sure how much we'll be meeting in the meantime. So I really don't know. Sorry, that's a lot of words for saying I'm not so sure what's going on now. I will say on the community engagement question, I'm not sure if you want us to address that now, that I think it did seem like individuals were keeping track of what was brought up from comments from like public comments, and then also especially we did a specific session community engagement on our topics that that prompted a lot of conversation. So I would say those are the two ways that folks integrated some of that into the sub working groups. I'm not sure if I was supposed to answer that now or later, but there you go.
Thanks.
Sam.
Capturing both in your liaison updates. Great, Sam. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Sam. Were you or other folks from this subcommittee on the climate council meeting on Monday, where we got the report for the from the Cap and Invest it was a report from the Cap and Invest study that was about, mostly it initiated from transportation, the transportation sector, but it was looped into other different sectors that tie into the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee. And Sam, you were, I think, on one of their advisory groups or something. Like you were involved, so you probably knew what was going on. But it was a really interesting presentation. And so if anyone who wasn't there able to watch it live, it's recorded and you'll be able to go back and find it. But it was a very helpful overview of what they learned and what they suggest and what the heck is a Cap and Invest study and all of the or a Cap and Invest program and all of those things. So yeah, I know Matthew, you were there. Yeah, Matthew was there. So, and I know, I mean, Liz was there for staff and I was there, but it was really interesting. And so we got a lot of answers, a lot of questions answered, but also hopefully we'll also get to hear in the near future from other regions that have done similar studies. We're hoping to have like a short 1 hour to 1.5 hour meeting where we can hear from folks who've done it, like from Quebec or California or Washington or New York State's working on setting up their own. So we're hoping to learn more about that, but it was a really interesting, informative thing, and it ties in so much with what the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee has been working on. So I just wanted to know if folks had tuned in, because I think that's super helpful. And there was a lot of talk of like, how do we weave equity into this?
Yeah, I think the implementation is the biggest, like where does that revenue go and how do you secure like that it goes there? And I think I think that's the same thing for so many of these actually, is that it's in the implementation. And I loved, I don't want to jump too much ahead, but I loved, I don't know if it's in Callie's section or someone's section, like the very last sort of recommendation was focused on implementation and the importance of ensuring, ensuring that these voices in the room right now are part of the implementation conversations after the fact versus sometimes the actual sort of initial conversations. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think there's also some really good Washington and several others. Actually, it might have even been a year and a half ago. They've done some really good, really short, very accessible webinars on like how things are going as they've gone. So those are also really useful to, I think, I think I watched that before we were even considering it, so I'll try to dig those out.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and seeing you were there, Sam, as like sort of helping to make sure it was equitable and all this, like on that sort of advisory panel. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, Matthew. See that your hand's up.
Yes, yes. And thank you, Kelly, for segueing that business agriculture that business side that I told David about, is will it help the state regardless which cap and invest, region we join? Will it help Vermont? That's the big question is because we don't want to be joined into a program that, will help other states but not Vermont. I know, like I said, New York is closer, but I'm looking at this as a, transportation of goods and services model. Think about it. You remember Vermont's rural, so we don't have, and the state's right. We don't have a lot of resources to go around, but also transporting those resources costs us money too as well. It's like fuel. We had to Vermont had to pay a surcharge regardless, So to me, the big question that I asked there was, what's in it for them, and that's one thing is that they're still looking around. I think the whole Vermont Climate Council is trying to get at is what's in it for us, to bring out that not just equity, what's going to bring us positive, net income for the state, because most of the stuff that we're exporting, out is profitable for other states, but what we get in return is less than value face, which is meaning what we get is less than what we're giving out. So that's also a concern that I brought up to the Vermont Climate Council, because you know what? We want our priorities. If we were to join, like I say, these regions, we want to make sure Vermont gets the best deal out of it instead of trying to be, we'll get the best deal, but unfortunately you get the less of a deal. So that's the question that I did ask, because it's Vermont, I agree, Vermont can't do this alone, but also you don't want to be taken advantage of too as well. And state's been taking advantage of Vermont for a long time, I've been seeing, and we need to put our foot down on some of this stuff. And thank you.
So really, sorry, should wait to see if anyone else wanted to respond first.
I just wanted to say, yeah, Matthew raised this exact question during the Climate Council meeting on Monday, and we had some really thoughtful answers from the contractors and consultants who were working on this issue, and also from some other counselors and things. So I would not be able to summarize them, but it's one of those where it's a little bit, it could go one way or it could go the other. It's not like an easy answer, but everyone was really appreciative of Matthew's question. And Matthew, I don't know if you stayed on long enough to hear people addressing it, but everyone was very very thankful that you raised that question, because it's like, yeah, why would they want that? This was the interpretation, like why would anyone want Vermont to jump in and join their thing? We're so small. What's the benefit to them unless they're taking advantage of us? But I think the hope is that when more states join into a coalition, there's like strength in numbers and bargaining, right? So
Yeah.
I think that, Sam, go ahead. You know much more about this than I do, but that was the sense I got from the responses I heard, but also I got this like, we don't know everything.
Yeah, I think we definitely don't know everything, but there's a difference in terms of what do we get in terms of, I think there's the emissions and then there's the finances, right? So we will get revenue as Vermont participating in this. That's like a pretty positive component of this. And given the state of federal funding, which, obviously we'll talk about a little bit later, this is a solid way to ensure we have revenue sources to address climate change moving forward. The negative part about how small we are is that we probably won't have as much control over setting the parameters of the programs. We'll just be joining on to other programs that were designed for others. And because of our size and because we don't produce we don't drill for oil, we don't mine for coal in Vermont, explicitly, and our fossil fuels come from elsewhere. Some of these reductions will just be in our use and will be emissions reductions technically elsewhere. So our emissions savings might not be as high. But I think and I'm massively oversimplifying. Basically some of our emissions reductions will be happening in other states, right? Not just in Vermont, from our actions. And that's going to happen anyways. But I do think that it's important that when we talk about the benefits and what do we get, that we separate the emissions and the revenue for pursuing other activities that also may be really important for emissions reductions. But I think even more so that emissions reductions for ensuring that we thriving communities that are resilient to future climate change, right? So it's all the other infrastructure too. And yes, sometimes we have to frame those as co-benefits to emissions, and that's fine. We can be flexible and bend it that way. But I think one of the things here is that it's not necessarily as, if we're looking at it explicitly through emissions, it's not necessarily as attractive as it could be. But if you're looking at it as a revenue generator to support activities that will cut our emissions and support our and Vermonters, it's not bad. And it actually is, could be reliable. But I mean, that's a super summary. And also that would be contingent on the implementation where revenue is used intentionally to support Vermonters. So that's a key piece.
Sorry, Matthew, I was taking a sip and I was on mute. Go for it, please.
It's also, so it has to be sustainable practice too as well, because we want something not just for the short term but for the long term. If Vermont's 1% in this, we want to get the best out of this program, and it's just, we want to make sure that investment comes back to us, so we can invest more, like I said, more programming, more climate issues friendly suggestions. It just we want to find, and the one in New York, the reason why I brought this up is that trades of goods too as well. I mean, if we get onto like you said, if we get on the regional with California, Seattle, Washington, and Quebec, what's going to look like for Vermont's trade industry. Remember, certain individual wants trade to be tariffs trades to be high, a certain individual, like I said, and that could, for us, it could, and we're still looking, I think the federal, government's still looking at that for Vermont, but we got to keep, our eyes on that, because it could be, it could not be worth it in the end if it goes the way he wants it to go. But to us, I'm hoping it brings out positive revenue if we do go either region would work fine. But I think in New York, it's because we're so close by them and they're less of a commute. I look at this as they're closer. Why not use them, because the trades, and goods from them are closer. So it's like, it'll be less, less of a cost, burden for a small state like us. But we're also, I think we're already, sending some, energy over to them. I mean, I live in Grand Isle County and we're already sending some kind of energy over to New York and back again. So it's like, we're already in that process of, trying to integrate some New York, stuff in Vermont stuff into New York. It's just, would it be either way? We're hoping to have positive net outcome, but it's that sustainable practices. It has to be sustainable at the end. Make sure that for the short term and the long term, that what we're doing here won't negatively affect us in the near future. It has to give us positive in return, so we can invest more into what we're doing through the outcome of this. Not just this program, but throughout Vermont's Climate Council's objective, is trying to make sure that we're sustainable, have sustainable business, but also a sustainable future for Vermont as a whole. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly. I see
Oh,
you.
I was just gonna say, I think that the nuances of what Matthew was just saying were discussed really helpfully in the Climate Council meeting. Yes, thank you, Sam, for dropping that in. I was just kind of trying to find it. There were moments where people were talking. It's a lot of detail, a lot of data, but Matthew's questions and concerns were actually discussed in quite a lot of detail. And it's not, there are no easy answers, but I also appreciate bringing it up here because I think the equity concerns are something that we can talk about specifically, and the council meeting sometimes leans towards like, well, we need to reduce emissions, and it's like, well, what about the equity concerns also? So I was happy to have that conversation now in this meeting. But I do think we had something on our agenda to talk about if there are any questions regarding federal funding and executive orders and things like that. And that's not something I necessarily know how to field, but if there were people who wanted to talk about that in this space, then I think that was the next thing on our agenda.
Yeah, I think the space sort of speaks for itself of if there's some implications and outcomes of the executive orders and federal funding that you are hearing or feeling are affecting kind of frontline communities. We wanted to hold a few moments to be able to kind of hear those concerns, hear those impacts, make sure that we're capturing that. Yeah, Matthew.
Yes, I just recently, got an email from, one of our representatives, a federal, from Peter Welch. He says, and it alarms all three of them that and we just got more information about what fundings are trying to cut. Some of them are climate change, but one is definitely the biggest problem of all, is that broadband that we're trying to build out. That comes to $224 million in federal funding that could get cut. So that broadband initiative that the state of Vermont wants to build out, if that funding gets cut, we won't be able to achieve our goals. To make sure that, like you said, that equity piece, to make sure that at least every single town at least have one fiber broadband build out, at least one, That's what I'm hoping for my town, at least have one, And that's at risk. Plus also some of it is grid modernization, which is utilities, if you have a power outages, which Vermont is prone to, the funding for that will be terminated too as well. So the utilities will have to either charge more for their constituents or customers to provide, that extra income so they can provide extra backup power. Like I said, there's a lot of, most of it's climate change, initiatives that, that the federal government or Trump himself wants to cut to be more efficient, but he doesn't see Vermont. He sees other states, that give him the net income plus revenue. Vermont will be hurt, and other states like us will be hurt desperately if these cuts go through. I think the federal governor has put a stop and hold on it, but not for so long. I mean, they can't hold him off too long. But like I said, he's doing some. This is what I'm seeing. He's doing some of the cuts that will be devastating to Vermont is some of the climate change initiatives that we're doing right now, but also the broadband build out, that the, Vermont Community Broadband Board is, trying to implement across the state. Those are the biggest, fundings on there, but most of them are stuff that we can get, the state said it can get by. These are small grants, by the way. The state can get by with some of them, but some of these we can't get by. Like I said, the broadband is one of the big ones, that's like 224 million. That's still coming to us, that's pending to us, from the federal government. If that goes, then we're in trouble, plain and simple, because, Vermont needs at least fiber broadband 21st century here and now for most states. So most states could, not most states, so most towns throughout Vermont can actually try to survive and make that economics for their own. And like I said, that's just a big caveat that we're looking at, and it's a concern. The way I look at it is, if you take those away, then Vermont's going to be even harder for us to continue to live that 21st century economic dream that everybody would hope and pray for, for the communities. That's exactly that. That's all. That's the update, and I'm still looking forward closely into this. But like I said, it's to be honest, it scares me. It's causing me for concern because, like you said, this involves with equity, and if, like I said, and if this goes away, there could be a lot of communities hurt by this negativity, not just physical, emotional, but economically too as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Open to hearing from others as well.
I don't have much to add. I know, Matthew, a lot of the funding sources you talked about are coming through the department or the, sounds like maybe the Community Broadband Board, which is housed in the Department of Public Service. And I would just echo and confirm that, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty and we are kind of just waiting to see where things will fall. Obviously, been a lot of information to absorb. So yeah, we're right there with you in terms of, yeah, being concerned that funding that we thought we would have may not be there, but more to come, I think, as we just wait and find out more.
Yeah, maybe I'll just do a quick little introduction. My understanding of memos that I have seen, both from, mostly from within our agency, through the Agency of Administration, through state government, is that, and then what we've heard from some federal program points of contact is that there is a program by program assessment that appears to be happening of various federal funds. Some funds have cleared the program assessment, and those dollars are now kind of available and free to be dispersed and reimbursed for, and federal draws by state partners and organizations. Others are currently in a paused state where it's unclear if any funds will make their way from the federal program to the state per the request for reimbursement. And then there are other circumstances where we have not been able to be in touch with the federal program point of contact. They've just been inaccessible and not responsive to emails or phone calls. And again, that's not a criticism. I can't quite imagine what it is probably like to be a lead point of contact on any federal funding programs at this point, given kind of all the kind of disruption that's currently kind of underway. So that's like my quick assessment of like what I understand is happening with the various federal funding. And I think what I have observed is that the state of Vermont has said that we have strong cash on hand reserves, and the recommendation from the Agency of Administration for state involved programs and funds is that we should continue kind of like business as normal until we hear from a particular program or we hear from within government that there's a change in that process. What I am recognizing is that that's not possible for all organizations, all private businesses or nonprofit organizations, that they don't have that same kind of access to capital on hand and ability to cover costs with state resources while we wait for programs to work their way through a process and or federal funds to be dispersed. So I am feeling and seeing a lot of that inequity based upon scale of organization, and frankly, just like cash reserves while we wait. Sam, is there a list of those that could be helpful? A list of those as in the programs?
Yeah, you were just saying that some seem to be moving, and I'll just say that I know that a lot of it seems like we've been requested to pause and then unpause and pause and unpause a lot of our work with towns and through our normal programs anyways, but our biggest concerns are FEMA for our town's sake, and HUD is a huge issue that we're just aware of, generally, but then on a project level, pretty, yeah, I mean, we don't have to list them all, I guess, but yeah, I wanted to add those to the conversation, but also ask, is there the best place to look? Because I'm, even though I'm supposed to be point of contact for certain things and or talking to points of contacts, obviously it's difficult, and I would love it if there was like a better place, a better researched place, a authoritative list to go through. That would be awesome. Or not authoritative, but a best guess. That would be very, very helpful for those working on the ground, to be honest, and also to help with misinformation and disinformation, and to keep the focus on, like, part of this is there wants to be reaction, and we need to stay focused on a lot of different things, and it's difficult when you're kind of going up and down. So that would be really great.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am not personally aware of a location where a list of the program kind of status is currently located. I think likely in part due to what you mentioned, that the status is like very volatile, like very fluid, like it's open, it's paused, it's unknown, there's no response, like we think it's paused again. Like I think there's a fair bit of that uncertainty that may be driving the lack of a list. But I appreciate that suggestion, and I'm happy to make that as a recommendation, at least within state government, to see if we could create such a list.
I heard that he's targeting all the programs that has the word equity in them, or equity and inclusion and diversity. So so if you're writing anything, please try to find the synonyms for equity and remove it from your plans, because this is what I heard from the State Refugee Office, Tracy Donald. They are actually reviewing every single one, and if there is a word equity or diversity or inclusion, they just put X on this thing. So
Yeah, Mona, sorry to talk so much, but I appreciate you brought that up, because some of the correspondence that we did receive directly from some federal bodies included DEI work, Justice 40 programs, and specifically community benefit programs, which is really tough because that's a phrase that's used. I mean, it's obviously not unintentional. It's used a lot in renewable energy. It's used a lot in like actually a lot of kinds of development for like how the community might benefit. I mean, that can also be like referencing a garden for like a local school when you're developing like a mall. I mean, that's a phrase that's used in contracts for a long time. And I do think that's something to be aware of is, is, we can rephrase these things without losing our intentionality, like energy independence. There are things like this that we can do while continuing to be accountable and to uplift those that are that people are attempting to undermine. But I don't know.
Thank you. I think both Kelly made a comment in the chat about Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility is compiling resources for businesses kind of in this period of time where there may not be the federal resources. Carrie also posted the Council of Nonprofits.org has a site that could possibly kind of aggregate kind of resources. Yeah, great. And yes, terrible to hear that kind of both the scrubbing that's feeling necessary, or the need to use synonyms for words that have had such important value and importance to the work around equity and inclusion. I also will say I have learned, I'm sorry, Anna, go ahead.
Well, finish.
I was just going to say, we have also learned within state government that we're not in a position to be able to do that kind of scrubbing and changing of language due to our resources being public records. So like our websites and things, I know that other nonprofit and private organizations may have that ability. And my understanding is that as a public institution, we're not able to do that. So just it's such a funny time. And I think we're all kind of figuring this out and negotiating it without a lot of information and without experience and exposure. So anyway, again, hence I think this time to just sort of share both resources and emotions, reactions to it. So yeah, Anna, sorry.
Sorry. I was going to ask if anybody had attended these federal task force that two other people put in the chat. I have gone to the website to try and sign up for it, but it doesn't look like the next meeting is yet posted. And then on the feeling side, it's just been a terrible month to be a sub-recipient of money as a nonprofit, and all the nonprofits in our area and all of the service providers in our area are scared. Our Pride Committee is scared. And I appreciate, I think Sam mentioned the sort of, and if somebody else did, sorry, I appreciate whoever mentioned the misinformation and disinformation aspect of it, because there is just such a flood of stuff. And I understand that, like, the point is to confuse and scare us, and I'm saddened that it's working, at least on my side of the world.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing.
What was the webinar like, Sam? It just like a tiny peek into.
It was specifically on how nonprofits and businesses can be aware of their role when interacting with Homeland Security or any other officers around immigration. Really geared towards the employer. But it was very useful.
I think another question I have is this subcommittee under threat because of the anti-DEI executive orders in a way that we may not know or understand or have any power or control over? And if anybody more connected to the government knows more than I do, or more connected to the Climate Council.
Yeah, I don't know. Has there been any conversation within the Climate Action Office, Liz? Again, I think I should have shared my perspective and understanding from across state government, which is like we're in a hold steady kind of moment in time as best anyone and everyone can, until there's something more definitive, which is not a very proactive approach, but I think it's designed to kind of manage anxiety and kind of what feels a bit out of, kind of decisions that feel a bit outside of our control. But I don't know specifically if the Climate Action Office or the Climate Council have had any conversation specifically about just transition and DEI work within the Climate Council Climate Action Plan.
I haven't heard anything specific to that. I mean, Agency of Natural Resources is also monitoring the different grants, funding, things that might be impacted. But I did also attend the federal task force, and there might be a climate one coming up that I need to follow up with them about. So that's, yeah, stay tuned about that. But otherwise, those are great resources.
All what I want to say is that everyone, they don't know what's going to happen. Everyone is uncertain. And, even the people that in very high positions, they are afraid, and that's why you can see that the Congress is not doing anything, because also they are afraid to. And I am not sure who gives this guy this power. And I know that we are recording this meeting, and I wish he hears me. What he's doing is not fair, especially for the people that they don't have any power from the beginning. They are scared. They are scared for their kids, walking in the street and somebody just to stop them. They are afraid to send even their kids to school. It's just this is not fair. What's happening is not fair. That our commissioner already resigned, or he's retired, and if this is give me an impression that all these people, they cannot do anything. All this, I hear this, we are in a democratic country, but this is what's happening here is a dictatorship, that most of refugee and immigrant, left in countries because of this. And this is what's happening here in the state. And I just, in USA, it's so scary. It's so scary. All of us are very scared, even though we have we have a passport, but he wanted to strip. He wanted to, to pass that he can denaturalize people, the people that he's not going to like. He wanted to take Gaza. after he already killed, he killed because he sent the money to Israel to kill 70,000 kids, in Gaza, and he wanted to go and do, like build the Gaza for his own pleasure. So why he doesn't go and build, like Florida or Los Angeles, after all these fires? Why he's interested to build in another people's land? Because this is the nature of America. This is the nature when they came here at the beginning, and as European settlers, and they killed, the Indian, and they took their land, and he's repeating the same thing.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. Okay, I'm going to suggest that we move on. This is an important space, I think, to hold, and hopefully this space is also held in other parts of your lives, whether that's in your personal life or in your work environment, since this is clearly a insufficient amount of time and focus for such an important and impactful part of what's happening in our country right now, and kind of influencing at the individual community and individual human life. But I'd like to move on unless there's any other kind of comments. Callie, thanks for being here. You came at a fine time. And yeah, sorry that we just wrapped up the kind of space held for just talking about and sharing both emotions and impacts of what's happening in our country, kind of in an apolitical conversation, as best we can, of just executive orders and federal funding freeze and pauses. But glad that you're here. Anything that you want to add before we transition? Okay, I just wanted to give you the space. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we have about 11 minutes before we're going to take a pause for public comment. I don't see any member of the public in our meeting at the moment, but they could join around 5:15. But the rest of our meeting, except for maybe the last few minutes, and we can adjust the agenda a little bit and do what's next for maybe like the final 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be a full 10 minutes. To talk about kind of upcoming meetings, but the rest of this time is to talk through and review our draft Just Transition chapter. And that's like a big part of work that's been happening by a group of drafters from within this subcommittee over the past, I don't know what it's been, 6 weeks. Members of our subcommittee had an opportunity to see a first draft in advance of our January meeting, and then we all had a chance to we all received and may have had a chance to review a second draft of that chapter prior to this meeting. Given we didn't provide a lot of time, we wanted to do the process as I described at the beginning of the meeting of going through section by section, both providing some silent reading and reflection time, and then actually reading aloud each section, and then having any discussion that's necessary of what feels like it's missing, edits that might be suggested for the drafters as we prepare for this third and final draft over the next 2 weeks. Okay, so that's our plan. That's the rest of our time. I'm happy to do a screen share if that would be helpful. And then I wondered if someone else, Kelly, I don't know, this might be a task that doesn't require a lot of talking, which might be a good fit for kind of what your voice is at, which would be to kind of time keep and get us, to walk through each section with some silent time, and then identify either the lead author, if they're here this evening and interested in reading aloud the section, or someone else from the subcommittee. And again, we'll pause in about 10 minutes for public comment and then continue on until the final few minutes of our meeting before 6.
Abby, is there, I am someone who doesn't do great editing on the fly when people are, when everyone is doing it together collectively. So is there, how would we give suggestions for changes if not now in the moment? Email them to somebody or put them in a document or?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so you could send comments on any portion of this draft to Kelly and I and Sophie. So that's what I would recommend, is that it could be, you could send any feedback of things that are missing or things that you'd like to see included, suggestions for the lead authors. And we can make sure that that makes it to the drafting team. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking that question. Okay. I'm gonna start with the screen share. I think. Let me see here. I used to think that having 2 screens was sufficient, and now I feel like I need at least 3, maybe 4 to be able to do all this. Okay. Can you all see the draft chapter? I'll maybe even zoom in even more. Okay. Great. So what I had sort of hoped was we would do a kind of a review of this section by section, starting with the introduction, which Alex has been the lead author on the introduction. And there's been a team of drafters that have been working on this. And I will admit, I have not been one of them. And some are here in this meeting, Claire and Carrie and Alex and then both Mona and Matthew have done a plain language review of this draft and sort of offered some comments that you'll see in the margin, which I'll kind of expand the comments in each section. Yes, as well as Sophie and others that are not on this call. Okay, so sorry, I wasn't sure that I was doing this all on my own, but I think that I might be. And Alex, are you still with us? Yeah, Alex, do you, I'm gonna take like just a moment. We're just gonna do tiny section by tiny section. So just this first 2 paragraphs of the introduction, I'm gonna just do a quick timer for literally like 2 minutes for people to read it. And then Alex, would you be willing to read it aloud? And if you're not comfortable with that, please don't feel on the spot and let me know, and we'll find anyone else could read who's interested.
Yeah,
Sometimes
I'd be
reading
willing
loud
to
is
read
not-
it aloud.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, well, let's take just 2 minutes and we're going to read this introduction. Let me see if I can expand these comments over on the side one at a time that we can also reflect upon after we've had a chance to read it on our own and then have Alex read it to us. Okay, I'm going to set a timer right now for, this is a short section, I'm going to set it for 1 minute. Okay. Alex, would you do us the pleasure of reading this introduction, please?
Yes, of course. So my introduction says the Global Warming Solutions Act, GWSA, requires that Vermont's Climate Action Plan, excuse me for the background noise, but I'm sorry, I don't remember writing this part, incorporate equity into each recommendation. That's something that's not coherent, so we'll change that. But let me continue. The Just Transition Subcommittee is responsible for ensuring this is carried through. Our strategy has 3 parts. 1, creating space for equity-centered discussions in every meeting. 2, tackling structural challenges by enhancing the representation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, low-income, rural, and other frontline communities. And number 3, promoting widespread public engagement. Although the swift establishment of the council and its subcommittees resulted in some underrepresentation and power imbalances, efforts have been underway to diversify membership and improve inclusivity. Acknowledging that engagement needs to be continuous, the Council is dedicated to collaborating with Vermonters and ensuring that equity is woven into climate action at every level.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, so yeah, we're testing this strategy out here. So thanks everyone for bearing with. There's some comments that are provided over here on the side. Many of these are from the plain language review that Mona and Matthew did. And so I just want to kind of bring our attention to these comments, and then as part of just opening up and having any reaction and feedback to this small section of the introduction. There are other subcomponents of the introduction, which I'm just going to scroll down if you happen to be just looking at my screen, which include a component of what is a just transition, equality versus equity, who are Vermont's frontline and impacted communities, which goes through the bottom of this page and into the next page. And then that's to our next section. So that's the entirety of our introduction.
I'm sorry, can I ask 2 questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, one is just I know that there was conversations about that have gone back and forth around the whole climate action plan and readability in the entire plan, and then also having summaries that are accessible. And so I just wanted to know, like, if that conversation had made any decisions. And then my other question was just actually I'll save it. Sorry. Go ahead. That's all.
Anyone on the call feel like they can respond to Sam's question? Matthew, yeah, do you have a response to?
Yes, yes, I brought that up, not just in the notes, but also in front of the Vermont Climate Council in general, because one-pagers, that I see across my work across Vermont seems to work a lot better than the complexity language that Vermont's facing. And it seems like when you bring complex and technicality language in there, you lose participants. It's like, I said it again, I'm gonna say it again to everybody else in every committee. You gotta look at Vermont's demographics and you gotta adapt to it. Meaning if there's, veterans, senior citizens, individuals with disability, that's outcome more than, the traditional, you gotta understand that those, or low income families, you gotta understand that they may not have, financial needs or the needs to understand what you're saying, because they could come from a place where, like I said, language just was inaccessible for them, or they didn't go to school because it's costs too much, or like I said, it brings a lot back to that equity component that I did try to bring this. And Sam, yes, I did bring this up over and over and over again. It ain't just the climate councils that I've been saying this a lot. I've been saying to other agencies across Vermont too as well. If you want people to, or individuals that want to vote, or individuals that want to participate, you're gonna have to adapt to their access need. Everybody has them, including the governor. We need to address people's access needs here and now if we're going to get that message across to them and succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm I'm gonna just take a quick pause, seeing the time, in case there were any members of the public that intended to join our meeting for this period on the agenda to provide any public comment. Okay, I didn't see anyone from the public join, but I wanted to at least be respectful of that space on the agenda. So Sam, my sense is that I think Matthew is reiterating an agreement with and the consistent messaging of the importance of that kind of summary and accessibility of this plan. And doesn't seem like we have an answer to your question of how that's being incorporated into the plan structure. So I think that's just something we'll have to bring back to the council and or to Sophie to make sure that that makes it as part of the, the greater review of this plan. I want to just bring our attention to the two comments that are in this section and then try to keep us moving. Because I want to make sure that we make it through as much of the whole document, the whole document if possible, so that all drafters have some feedback and hear your concerns. So one of the comments was, I will suggest starting with Just Transition Subcommittee as a subcommittee of the Climate Council, who is charged with ensuring that equity is incorporated into recommendations of the Vermont Climate Action Plan. To do this, we developed 3 strategies. And so it's just a little bit of a wordsmithing edit suggestion in this first section that came as part of the plain language recommendation. And I'll admit, like, we got the draft from the drafters, I think on Friday. It was sent to Matthew and Mona, and they provided comments over the weekend and into Monday, so that then this could be sent out with the agenda on Monday. So everyone had a few days to possibly take a look and review before our meeting on today, which is Thursday. So tight timeline and tight turnaround. So these comments have not been shared necessarily with drafters and may not have been reviewed by any of our subcommittee yet. The second section of that first introduction had this comment as well. It's hard to understand. Please aim to make it simple. The suggestion was, despite underrepresentation and power imbalances of the council and its subcommittees, efforts to diversify membership is underway. The Climate Council is dedicated to collaborating with everyone living in Vermont to ensure that equity is woven into every step of the Climate Action Plan. Okay, any additional comments on this first section of the introduction that folks want to make at this time, and then know, per Anna's question earlier, that this is not your one and only opportunity. If you'd prefer to send something in writing to Kelly, myself, and Sophie, that's also another great way to provide comment. If I'm moving too quickly, let me know. I'm going to now just jump to the what is a just transition and the equality versus equity. So we're going to take both of those sections at once. And again, I might give us like 75 seconds, just enough time for everyone hopefully to be able to read it. And if it's too fast, let me know. Okay. This is our time to do a little reading again. Okay. Does someone else, Alex, I know that you also were the lead on this portion of the document. I'm happy to have you read it, or if someone else wants to read these two subsections of the introduction.
Can do it.
Thanks, Anna.
Both of them.
Yeah, why don't you start with what is a just transition, and we'll see if someone else wants to do the equality versus equity. Thank you.
What is a just transition? A just transition refers to the shift from a carbon-heavy economy to a low-carbon sustainable one. It means that vulnerable communities, particularly minority and frontline populations, receive support throughout this transformation. This approach emphasizes fairness and equity by addressing the unequal effects of climate change on marginalized groups. It highlights the importance of inclusive decision-making, enabling those communities to play an active role in shaping the policies that impact their lives. By focusing on equity, a just transition seeks to guarantee that everyone has the necessary resources and opportunities to succeed in the new green economy.
Anna, maybe just take a pause. Any suggestions or comments that anyone wants to offer on those few sentences around a just transition?
The only thing would be that for both of these sections, it might be nice if these are pop outs in the first time they appear wherever they are in the plan instead of having to be in our chapter. I don't know. Maybe that's not the point, but so to define, like, this is kind of defining it the first time they come up in the plan versus like someone having to peruse our I think a lot of people self-select out of certain chapters, right? Or really any chapter. A lot of people just read what they want to read, what they're looking for. So I don't know, just an overall.
When you mean a pop out, Sam, do you mean like a call out box, or do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Great. Okay. Would anyone like to read the equality versus equity, or have Anna continue?
We'll just keep going. There's plenty for other people to read after.
That's great. Thanks, Anna.
Equality versus equity. Equality and equity are often confused, but they have important differences. Equality means providing everyone with the same resources and opportunities, regardless of their circumstances or needs. While it promotes uniformity, it does not account for the unique challenges some individuals or groups may face in achieving the same outcomes. On the other hand, equity considers the varying circumstances, needs, and challenges faced by individuals and groups. It goes beyond treating everyone the same, advocating instead for the fair allocation of resources, opportunities, and support tailored to help each person or group. By addressing systemic barriers and inequalities, equity aims to create a level playing field where everyone has the tools and the opportunities needed to achieve shared goals. The guiding principles for a just transition highlight the significance of focusing on equity to pave the way for a more inclusive and fair journey towards our collective goals.
Yeah. And there were two comments as part of the plain language review. One was suggesting putting the image of equality versus equity for visual learners here, maybe again as a call out. And this comment, which was guiding principles developed by Just Transition Subcommittee is focused on equity by centering Vermont's frontline and impacted communities. Who are those? And I believe the answer to that was designed to be captured in this next section. But is there something that I'm missing in that comment that someone else is seeing? Okay. Any other comments for the equality versus equity section? Are we ready to move to the who are the Vermont frontline and impacted communities? Okay, so I'm gonna do, this will cover 2 pages, so I'm gonna scroll. We'll start for, again, like 45 seconds on this paragraph, and then I'll scroll down so you can see the full list of bulleted frontline and impacted communities that are included here. And then someone be thinking if they're interested in reading this section. Okay, this is a chance to read for a moment. Okay. Anyone feeling like they'd like to read this section aloud to the group?
I'm happy to read it, Abby.
Thanks, Claire.
Who are Vermont's frontline and impacted communities? Many residents of Vermont are significantly impacted by climate change. These effects are particularly severe for certain groups, referred to as frontline and impacted communities. Due to historic and current systemic oppression and/or barriers, these communities are especially susceptible to climate risks, including heat waves, flooding, droughts, storms, wildfires, and the decline of ecosystems and biodiversity. They also face climate-related changes like disruptions in agriculture, health risks, economic instability, and social unrest. Furthermore, frontline and impacted communities often endure greater exposure to pollution and higher risk of job loss as the economy shifts in response to climate change. With limited resources, political influence, and/or safety nets, these communities are often less prepared to deal with or recover from the impacts of climate change. The guiding principles emphasize the importance of including frontline and impacted communities in decision-making about climate action, and of distributing resources equitably to meet their specific needs and challenges. Specific frontline and impacted communities include rural communities, youth, senior citizens, non-native English speakers, women, unhoused and housing insecure, low income, LGBTQIAP+ individuals, recent graduates of the foster care system, people of color, Black, African American, Brown, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Indigenous communities and Native nations. Outdoor workers, incarcerated or formerly incarcerated populations, renters and subsidized housing tenants, chronically ill and hospitalized, single-parent households, people with disabilities, small business owners, immigrants, asylees, and refugees, unemployed and underemployed.
Thanks, Claire. Okay. Any suggestions? Yes, Matthew. Oh,
Individuals with disabilities. That ain't people. It's individuals. with disabilities. That wordsmith that word from people to individuals, because we are individuals. It just makes it sound, more complete. I'm sorry about that. Just a suggestion for remove the word people with individuals with disabilities
Yeah,
would
that's perfect.
definitely, yeah, because it would sound, better when preferring that or when you're addressing that, because like I said, most are individuals with disabilities. That's what's mostly the word common,
Yeah,
language. Thank you.
thank you. Perfect. Okay. Kelly.
On the immigrants, asylees, and former refugees, or former being struck out. I think I had put former in there, former refugees, because I remember Indra Acharya talking about how once you have found your new home, you are not a refugee anymore. You are a former refugee. So that was his terminology that he suggested. Um, and I would definitely defer to other people who have been refugees to say if this is meaningful language to say former refugees once you are not a refugee anymore and you are in a safe place. But also, yeah, anyway, that was the terminology that I heard from him that was meaningful. So I would like to ask other people what they prefer to be called if they have been refugees from other places and are now um not refugees anymore because they're in a new place and they're
So I'm going to ask if anyone wants to offer perspective in the chat to that question. I appreciate, and we can capture in the notes that that was recommended language from Indra. I think that could be helpful. Kelly. Okay, Claire.
Yeah, I don't know that this may be a Liz or Sophie question, but to the extent that there's an interest in linking between chapters where they talk about overlapping materials, but in the first paragraph, where we talk about um, they also face like how communities are particularly impacted. I think the chapter on health will dive much more deeper into that. So it may just be a good place to cross-reference, even if just like a footnote or parentheses, like chapter X on whatever uh, discusses this in more detail.
Yeah, I would put that in parentheses for now, and then Sophie could decide later how she wants to handle that. I know we're hyperlinking things. I'm just not sure
Yeah.
about to point to different sections. So parentheses for now is fine.
Yeah.
Claire, I was gonna go off of that actually and say I know that I've totally fallen off the face of the earth for like 6 weeks. So, but I had started drafting some of the boxes we had talked about, which reference specific groups here. And I don't know if we'd want to offer some of the boxes like to the Climate Council as an example put them in this section so that they can see. And then, I mean, ultimately it would be nice to say, here are the following that have been identified throughout the other chapters and then reference them. And then here are folks that still need to be considered. Or, I mean, we don't necessarily have to do it that way, but also, I mean, it would be great to have that link, I guess. And also, I don't know if those are useful still, but I could see us like teasing them here, being like, this is kind of what was imagined, if that's still a go or not.
Yeah, my understanding, Sam, is that the call out boxes is definitely still a go. And I think we thought we had a little bit more time to kind of officially finalize those content and location. But I think knowing your suggestions of topics and or locations is great. The sooner we have it, I think the better, the kind of more complete this draft is.
Okay, cool. I had done a few off of like climate and aging because I had assumed that that would make it in there, and
Great.
knowing Alice very well, who's on the health chapter, some other things that might be there. So maybe I'll try to cross-reference that chapter before I hand them over. And then I also done some with the well, based off the recommendations from building and thermal, what will end up being, I know that things will be in the chapter, so just as an example, so maybe that will be helpful.
And I know that in a previous meeting, Claire had mentioned, so we had talked about the possibility of including various data points. So this, it also feels like it relates to this piece. So maybe there's some energy data, there could be some agriculture data that could be a good call out box.
Yeah, I was definitely intending to either reference reports that had good summaries of data, or at least having one data source per thing. Yeah, Claire, maybe when you get back, let's maybe, I don't know, maybe that's too late, but
No, I was gonna say we should definitely connect because I've kind of been struggling on seeing how those fit in separately from some of the other things we had talked about, but maybe it's just that those data points get incorporated into call out boxes or other components. And I'll email you. Maybe we can try and connect quickly before I head out on vacation.
cool. Yeah, I definitely won't be able to do all of them. I don't know nearly as much in some fields, but maybe if we can get some examples, maybe some of the other chapter authors might also have things that might be drawn into the boxes too.
Yeah, great. Okay, Kelly.
The only thing I was just in the call out box thing, Alex had put together something that was maybe something that we go in a call out box, and maybe but would probably go into our chapter here. So that might be a good like example of what Sam can do with cool formatting and good call out box stuff. So I don't know if that's helpful. And maybe I missed something, but that was my one little contribution there.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move to the next section. So this ended up being a combined section, had been two separate sections and then became one section that's being referred to as the then and now. And I think the recommendation at the last draft version had been to try to capture the then and now into kind of whatever you call it, like side-by-side boxes. And this has been sort of, I think, a collaborative effort between Claire and Carrie. Yes, is that right?
I'll say Sophie ended up doing all of my drafting.
And Sophie.
I don't
Okay.
deserve any of the credit.
Sophie. Yeah,
Okay.
Sophie.
And Sophie. So it's a lengthier section. There's the overview and then the call out boxes. So I'm gonna I think this is, and this also has a bunch of wordsmithing edits in here, as well as a few comments along the side. I'm sorry, I'm just going to scroll for a second. I'm just wanting to look at, so it's 540 and there's a couple of different sections that I would like us to get through just so that every author has a little bit of the feedback. How would people feel if instead of just silent on this one, we actually just read this section aloud?
Abby, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I want to know if other people think this would be helpful, is if you could turn off the track, like close the track changes thing, but keep the comments, so we just, or like do like minimal track changes so that we can see what is being proposed now and we can review that. And then also I do think we're pretty close because the last thing that you scrolled down to was Alex's youth thing, and that's proposed to be specifically a call out box, which is what I was talking about a minute ago. So it just might be easier. So like having the comments on the side is great, but not having like all of the red lines and crossouts is probably a lot easier for folks if we want to review it quickly.
Okay.
Does that sound good for others? I mean, that's just my opinion.
I think it helps from a readability standpoint. This doesn't have to be the official version. The track changes will exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it just like hiding it for now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyone want to take the first stab at reading the then and now kind of opening paragraph?
I can read it.
Thanks, Callie.
The Just Transition then and now. The Just Transition Subcommittee's work during the initial 2021 Climate Action Plan focused on developing the guiding principles for a just transition and accompanying assessment tool. The subcommittee simultaneously worked on engaging the public in the planning process. Contracted organizations supported public engagement during the summer and fall of 2021, resulting in a final report in October 2021. Another consultant, Kaya Morris, met with other subcommittees in the council to help them apply the guiding principles to evaluate their recommendations for equity considerations. Additionally, liaisons between Just Transitions and other council subcommittees were present to uplift equity considerations in real time as those subcommittees were deliberating suggestions for the CAP.
Thank you. There was a comment offered in this first sentence that says the Just Transition Subcommittee work initially started in the first year of the Climate Action Plan by focusing on developing and guiding principles for the just transition and its accompanying tool. Any other comments on this opening paragraph that anyone wants to offer?
All right.
Okay.
I think this would be cool if we do, and maybe this is a question for after, but if we do get to review recommendations as a committee and highlight a few from the Just Transitions perspective, this would be the ideal spot to reference this.
Okay. All right, so there was two, let's see, did we capture all these comments? Okay. How do people feel about doing a quick review of, we'll read aloud the then and then the corresponding now, and just go through as best we can here in the time we have left.
Hold on one second. I feel like maybe I didn't hear what Sam was saying. Sam, did you have a specific request or anything like that?
I was just saying if we do like ultimately get to review the recommendations and highlight some as like priorities for from a just transitions perspective, this would be a great place to reference those.
Oh, yes, got it. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were talking about what we were running right here or, yeah, that makes sense. And agreed.
Okay, does someone want to join me? I'm happy to read the then if someone else wants to read the now.
I can do that, Abby.
Let's do it. All right, then, initial climate action plan from 2021. The subcommittee drafted the guiding principles formally adopted by the Climate Council in August 2021. There were only 4 months to incorporate the guiding principles into the plan. That was not enough time to use the principles proactively to develop and prioritize recommendations.
Now, revised Climate Action Plan 2025. The Just Transition Subcommittee heard from other subcommittees that using the guiding principles while developing recommendations felt daunting. In response, the JTSC created a simplified visual explaining which questions to ask at each step of the planning process. It showed when and how to consider public input.
I'm going to suggest in the respect of time that Claire and I just do this then and now. And if there's a comment that anyone wants to offer, please raise a hand, just unmute, whatever way to just sort of make sure that we capture that. Okay. For the next one, from then, members of our subcommittee were unclear on how and when to apply the guiding principles. Liaisons from Just Transitions to other subcommittees were available for support.
And addition to the guiding principles, simplified visual, 5 JTSC members volunteered as liaisons to the other subcommittees. The liaisons attended those subcommittees' meetings to help them apply the guiding principles throughout the drafting process rather than at the end.
And I will say there was a question here as to whether this should be the 4 Just Transition Subcommittee members or 5 to include Claire, who serves as a liaison, even though as not an official member, but as a staff support. My recommendation was that we capture that staff support liaison officially as a fifth liaison.
Suggestion to say 5 representatives from the Just Transition Subcommittee volunteered as liaisons.
And can we say consider instead of apply? I think it
Say
would
what,
be a little
Sam?
bit
Sorry?
consider instead of apply. It might be a little bit more accurate.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Wait. Okay.
All right, the next then and now. Then the quick timeline limited public engagement during the first climate action plan. Agency of Natural Resources staff had to move quickly to contract outreach support, which did not allow time for deliberation and input from the Just Transition Subcommittee.
Public engagement occurred before and throughout the planning process at key junctures. Public input was better communicated to subcommittees and the council through quarterly reports and other means. Engagement activities were vastly broadened to lift up voices of frontline and impacted communities. These improvements were possible because of a new staff position in the Climate Action Office and additional capacity via the consensus buildings. These did not exist during the Climate Action Plan process. See Public Engagement chapter for full details.
Okay, then there was not a streamlined process in place to ensure that public input was reviewed and discussed by subcommittees and the council before decisions were made.
In fall 2024, the JTSC created public comment recommendations detailing how to better receive and incorporate public comment in the subcommittee's work. A revised version was then adopted by the council for their own work in early 2025.
And the last then and now, then the CAO did not have a designated staff person to support JTSC. A staff member from Public Service Department and another from Department of Environmental Conservation supported JTSC.
In addition to the 2 support staff, CAO Communications and Community Engagement Coordinator supported the JTSC. CBI also provided facilitation support to the subcommittee for 2 key meetings. Actually, I had a comment on the then version of this last one because it feels like we should note that actually we had quite a bit more staff support in the first iteration because Abby, you were still technically staff support, and we had Ross from VTrans and also Amanda Carlson from Capstone. And I know we highlighted that CBI facilitated 2 meetings, but David Plum was actually pretty involved in Just Transitions. I feel like he often attended. So
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, we had CBI support in the first iteration from mostly David, like coming and facilitating our meetings. Yeah.
In the then section.
In the then, I feel like
in the then, we just like give credit. And then when he wasn't going to be facilitating, I was like, what will we do?
Great.
And I don't know that he facilitated every meeting, but he was definitely more involved. He helped plan and guide the discussions. So.
Especially in that first year. He was there in almost every meeting. So I don't want to shortchange that.
Great. Okay. Great. I'm aware of our time, but I'd like to do this challenges and stumbling blocks section, there was quite a few comments in here that I'm not sure we're going to have time to talk through, but I want to capture if there's additional comments. So at least we're capturing feedback. And then, as Kelly noted, the last section are some possible topics for the call out boxes, Sam, which is some of the pieces that you've been working on. And then there were some suggested topics here. I guess just the youth as an impacted community was the one that was moved here for now. But I'm sorry, I'm going to scroll back up and encourage that we read through the challenges and then the recommendations. Does anyone want to choose to read, or I'm happy to do it? Okay, I'm going to just jump into reading challenges. There was a suggestion on maybe retitling this section of stumbling blocks to something else. So like maybe making it the title being challenges faced by Just Transition Subcommittee, for example. Okay, challenges. There was not adequate time for JTSC members to reintroduce the guiding principles and other tools to the drafting subcommittees and help them become fully comfortable with the materials. More time is needed for new JTSC members to become oriented to the CAP update process and their role in it, and for the JTSC to build meaningful relationships with the other subcommittees. The time commitment for subcommittee members is high, and the current compensation system per diem doesn't adequately reflect that. The low per diem may preclude people from marginalized and frontline communities from participating as subcommittee members. The time commitment for JTSC liaisons to attend the other subcommittees' meetings, was high. Some liaisons did not have the capacity to engage as much as other liaisons. Many recommendations in the CAP are broad, thus they could be implemented either equitably or inequitably, depending upon decisions made by the implementers, usually the legislature, executive branch, or a combination of the two. This can make conversations about incorporating equity into the CAP complicated and confusing. There has not been enough capacity and time allocated for equity training for counselors and subcommittees. Daytime meetings are inaccessible for subcommittee members who work during the day and cannot leave their jobs to attend virtual meetings. This has limited JTSC liaison participation in other subcommittees' meetings. Any additional comments, reflections on those challenges? Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, compensation is a big key to that, and thank you for bringing it up. It's not just that flexibility and availability, it's compensation. I mean, let's be honest, Vermont likes to do things free. We can't just like the police, we can't just pay the police free, of service. They have their families, we gotta be talking about. So the big thing is compensation, but I see it all comes back to collaboration. That's what's going on. That's what I'm seeing is if we can't collaborate efficiently, nothing's going forward. Believe me, I'm on other committees and you're having the same problem that I'm seeing in other committees. It's like either there's not enough flexibility, not enough availability, or not enough, compensation to do that extra work, because most people already are like me. I'm tapped out, but I like to still be involved in this because I know for me, it all intersects to each other. It all collaborates. If you're talking about climate change, then you're talking about all the thermal energy, you name it, everything that Vermont's made of, it is in that collaborative, infrastructure way. And like I said, one part without one missing part makes the whole system fall apart. Pretty much, it's like a missing link. You have a weak missing link, then everything falls apart. And like I said, I do think, for me, I think it all integrates, but also it all incorporates each other and all collaborative to each other. But to me, it's like that. What's going to take to for participants to be more involved. I think we'll be upping the compensation. It could be because there's some people, that may want extra incentives to do the hard work that they're doing already. And there's some that say they can't do it because they're already tapped out. So to me, it's like it all comes back to compensation, in my opinion. We want to be respected for what you do when you're doing that work too, as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I heard you say a couple of things, Matthew, that I put in my notes, that we need compensation, flexibility, and availability for increased participation, which results in more collaboration. And then Sam put in the chat, I feel like these are specifically focused on the CAP process versus content-specific challenges and recommendations. And I think we should have both in distinctive sections. I think that's a good comment. Yeah, that this isn't really speaking to content.
Yeah, it does, Matthew, again. It actually all collaborates together. I mean, whether it's content or doing actual work physical, or mental, or doing that work, in a committee group of others, it's like you're trying to give a piece of yourself toward that hard work, but I also want to be appreciated for your hard work doing that too as well. It's like it all works in hand. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
I wish, but you know what? It's to do that job, it's impossible by itself. Going at it alone. But like I said, but when we collaborate, like having all that together, it'll definitely bring more, be more efficient way of the process of this going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I was just gonna say, I think like an example, I think this should be it's a great section as is on process, but like the content specific ones I was thinking about would be more like, the challenges of all the upfront costs around for weatherization, right? So there's like home repair and remediation work that has to happen. There's some social service wraparound work that has to happen, and also like the fragmentary form of funding based on incomes, right? We've talked a ton about that, like, and then the recommendation around like grouping some of those projects or where the funding for that comes from, like that's going to come up in one of the other chapters, but we might want to highlight it again here so it's not buried. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm saying is like where equities really come up in our content, like our subcommittee meetings and that we liaise to, where there really is, but like, yes, we really want to do that, but here are the challenges. I think those are some of the things that we also want to make sure in the chapter, or at least get that call out box on the side. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. That feels like a section, kind of a part that's missing.
And Sam, one of the conversations we've had in steering committee or wider council meetings is about tell me if I'm off base, but something that is letting like elevating certain things that we want to pull out as equity things, or like a really good story that helps bring it to a personal level or whatever. And so the call out boxes, this sort of stuff that you've sort of been flagged for, Sam, is something that we've been talking about as helping pull these equity things out and pulling them into something that is easy to find in the climate action plan and all of that. So don't know if that actually addresses what you were talking about, but definitely that's something we've been talking about. Sorry, families calling from the other room.
So I appreciate that, Kelly. I think, no, we have not read through the 7 or the 6 recommendations there. It is 6:01. I want to be respectful of the fact that people expected to stay until 6 and some have to leave promptly. I think the next steps are that there are some comments that are captured in this draft. There's some comments that are captured both in the notes that Anna has likely taken, as well as some that I have taken, maybe some of you individually. And I think those just need to be aggregated into an updated draft version that is shared with Sophie, that then is made available to drafters as some focused edits and additions for the coming 2 weeks before the final draft is due on the 28th. Does that sound like a good process of kind of like what's next? I'm going to stop sharing since I don't think we're going to do that final recommendation section or the call out section. So Sam, we may have some ongoing conversations around call out boxes. You may do a conversation with Claire and possibly myself, and know that we have a little bit more time for those as well, because that kind of falls into the formatting category as opposed to just straight content. And I think we can say, see you in March. At one point, we had contemplated whether we were going to change the meeting dates. I think at this point, we're keeping the March 6th meeting for the purpose of on timeline for finalizing our chapter, and then we can look at the upcoming meetings after that. Okay.
That sounds good. Thanks, Abby.
Thanks all. Thanks for sticking with this. Anna, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yep, and that's our, looking forward to our objectives, on that. But thank you, Abby, for keeping us in the loop and keeping us, straightforward, moving forward with this, with equity in mind. Thank you.
Of course.
I agree. Thank you. I just wanted to say I do have more capacity than I have in the last 6 months, and if there's some editing passes that would be helpful for me to do, I'm happy to. So especially thinking maybe once these comments are incorporated, doing a pass on the entire thing for just kind of consistency between the different, writing styles. So just, yeah, reach out if you want some help with editing.
Anna, do you feel like you could do a first pass at putting into this draft document the edits and comments that were provided from the meeting minutes, that then I can add anything that I also captured, and then we can send that back to drafters and Sophie?
Sure.
Okay, great.
I don't know if I have an editable version. Is the version that was shared in the all just transition subcommittee editable by me?
Yes, I believe it was just a Word doc version that, yeah, you can edit.
Well, if not, I'll email you. I'll just
Or let me know. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
that would
Okay.
be, I think that'll be helpful because also having a new set of eyes, Anna, would
Yes,
be
take
great.
advantage of my absence.
Because I had the same thing, or I was like, I haven't read this. So I'm glad. Yeah, I think that'll be helpful. One more.
Hope your throat feels better, Kelly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel fine, but I sound horrible. And my mother has the same thing, and she's down in Delaware, but she called me and she said, I'm gonna send you a text, and it was just Ariel with the shell. Oh. Yeah, no, me too. Good to see you all. Thank you.
See you too. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Have a nice long weekend.